And this is why he got ruled out point.
You Dustin Poirier?
Man, fuck you, bro. I'll fight you right now.
No, I don't want to fight, bro.
I'll go with you right now.
Bro, I don't want to fight.
Because it's going to be bad.
Bro, just
it's going to be bad, my nigga.
No, bro.
The cruelest part of Dustin Poirier's career was not getting dropped by Conor McGregor's left hand. It was not being knocked out by Justin Gaethje's head kick. It was the fact that he survived and won some of the most violent fights of his era, yet reached the door of the undisputed lightweight championship 3 different times, and every time, someone wrapped an arm around his neck and stopped him from walking through. Khabib Nurmagomedov, Charles Oliveira, Islam Makhachev. 3 generations of lightweight kings, 3 different fights, the same ending. The irony is that the first technique that truly made UFC fans remember Poirier was a submission. In his early days, he forced a young Max Holloway to tap in the opening round with a mounted triangle armbar. By the end of his career, 13 years later, his hands had become heavier. His shifting combinations had become one of the division's most polished weapons. And he had beaten a long list of former champions and elite contenders. Yet the kind of weapon that kept him from the undisputed throne was the same one he had once used to finish other people. That is what makes the Diamond such a painful story to look back on. He was willing to trade with anyone in the center of the octagon. He could keep punching when his legs were gone. He could turn an ordinary matchup into a fight that left both men looking permanently changed. But his 3 undisputed title losses kept telling him the same brutal truth. Some doors cannot be forced open by hard punches alone. Today, we are going to break down why Dustin Poirier could defeat Max Holloway, Justin Gaethje, Eddie Alvarez, Anthony Pettis, Michael Chandler, and Conor McGregor, but still never bring the undisputed lightweight championship home to Louisiana. Poirier was never an easy kid to control. He dropped out in the 9th grade and spent time in juvenile detention around his freshman year. His family had every reason to fear that the streets might destroy him completely. Nobody could have imagined that the same angry kid would eventually lock all that violence inside a rule-bound cage and use his fists to change his family's life. One of the fights that convinced him mixed martial arts could become a way out was the legendary war between Forrest Griffin and Stephen Bonner. Both men were covered in blood, and neither was willing to take a step backward. Most people saw madness. Poirier saw a way out. He found a local gym and wanted to know one thing. Would training there eventually give him the chance to compete? Once he knew the answer was yes, he buried himself in the gym. The early Louisiana fight scene barely looked like professional sport. Poirier warmed up in rough venues surrounded by mud, dust, and sometimes even chickens wandering nearby. Rules varied from event to event, and fighters competed in 4-ounce gloves. He did not come through a complete amateur system, and nobody built a careful path for him. He learned by fighting for real how to protect himself, how to stay calm in chaos, and how to keep throwing when his gas tank was almost empty. The first coach who truly recognized what he could become was Tim Credeur. After 5 rounds of one of their earliest sparring sessions, Credeur was spitting blood and thinking the same thing. This kid could become a world champion. But talent did not create an easy road. Poirier lost his WEC debut, and the experience taught him that competing for a major promotion did not automatically create financial security. For the first time, the dream showed him its real price. Passion could not pay rent, and heart could not cover the bills. When the WEC merged with the UFC, Poirier accepted a late-notice opportunity, moved down to featherweight, and faced Josh Grisby. Almost nobody expected the replacement fighter from Louisiana to win. Instead, Poirier controlled all 3 rounds and never allowed Grisby to find a rhythm. In one night, he went from an unknown name on the regional scene to a legitimate UFC fighter. But the brighter the rise, the harder the fall. Against the Korean zombie Chan Sung Jung, Poirier learned for the first time that pure toughness was not enough to beat the elite.
Nice little elbow off the clinch for Poirier and a knee.
I'll find out. I'll push this as far as I can push it.
These guys are going at it. Korean zombie just finished him with his own toe.
I train hard.
Jung was willing to exchange with him, but he could also connect striking, wrestling, and submissions without giving Poirier time to settle. Every time Dustin tried to increase the pace, Jung changed the phase of the fight and broke his rhythm. In the 4th round, Poirier was submitted by a Darce choke. The loss did not force him out of the UFC, but it forced him to see himself clearly. He could be braver than almost anyone, yet his game was still incomplete. So he left Louisiana and moved to Florida to join American Top Team. Years later, McGregor mocked him for leaving home, presenting it as weakness. Poirier understood the opposite. Staying comfortable would not make him better. He needed to train with people capable of taking him apart every day. In 2014, the Irishman in the tailored suit, the man whose mouth moved even faster than his hands, stood across from him. Conor McGregor's offense never began inside the cage. He attacked Poirier's hometown, his team, and his confidence, portraying him as an ordinary fighter who would collapse under the lights. Poirier later admitted that the words got inside his head. He was no longer thinking about how to win. He was thinking about how badly he wanted to shut McGregor's mouth, and that was exactly the trap Conor had built.
Hands at his hips, having a conversation, looking to finish the fight. That's it. It is all over.
McGregor's left hand did not end Poirier's career, but it ended the featherweight version of him. Poirier stopped forcing his body down to 145 pounds and moved permanently to lightweight. Some people called it running away. In reality, the true diamond was forged one division higher. Without the extreme cut, Poirier kept his speed while gaining power, durability, and consistency. He stopped charging forward on emotion alone and developed a boxing system that belonged entirely to him. From the southpaw stance, he protected the center with a compact guard, used his lead hand to draw reactions, and fired the rear left straight through the openings. When opponents tried to answer, he used his shoulders, forearms, and gloves to absorb the first shot, then reclaimed the exchange with layered combinations. The cruelty of the system was not that Poirier always knocked you out with one punch. It was that every time you landed one, you often had to absorb 2 or 3 in return. Anthony Pettis dragged him through extended grappling exchanges, but suffered a rib injury during the fight and could not continue. Eddie Alvarez loved fighting inside disorder, yet in their second meeting, Poirier remained composed in the chaos and stopped him with punches. Justin Gaethje damaged him with low kicks and uppercuts, but in the fourth round, Poirier found the opening and buried one of the sport's most dangerous pressure fighters beneath a storm of combinations. Pettis proved Poirier could survive complicated grappling exchanges. Alvarez proved he could think clearly inside chaos. Gaethje proved something even more important. When a fight became a question of which man would break first, Poirier could still be the last one standing. The fighter who finally brought him within touching distance of gold was Max Holloway. 7 years earlier, Poirier had submitted the UFC newcomer in the first round. By the time they met again, Holloway had become the featherweight king, armed with endless volume, shifting angles, and championship conditioning. Holloway kept changing position and firing combinations, trying to drown Poirier beneath pace and numbers, but whenever Max landed 3 or 4 punches, Poirier answered with the heavier left hand. Holloway won many of the exchanges in volume. Poirier won them in damage. After 25 minutes, Dustin's face was covered in blood, but the interim lightweight championship was finally wrapped around his waist. His wife and daughter were there to see it. The young man who had once struggled to pay the bills had become an interim UFC champion, but the interim belt only carried him to the first door of the undisputed throne.
He's got it. It's under the neck.
There's the tap. Still undisputed.
Khabib Nurmagomedov was waiting behind it. Poirier knew he could not spend an entire fight wrestling with the eagle. He had to seize the smallest opening. In the third round, it appeared. Poirier locked both arms around Khabib's neck and tightened the guillotine. The arena held its breath. For several seconds, it looked as though the impossible might happen. Khabib never panicked. He adjusted the angle, moved his weight towards safety, and slowly pulled his head free. The closest seconds of Poirier's championship pursuit slipped through his arms. Moments later, Khabib took his back and locked in the rear naked choke. On his first attempt to become undisputed champion, Dustin Poirier tapped. After the fight, he cried and said he felt as though he had let everyone down. But this was also what separated Poirier from so many other fighters. He could lose a championship fight without losing the part of himself that still wanted to fight. Many contenders collapse emotionally after one missed opportunity. Poirier had the ability to break a loss into pieces and put those pieces back inside himself as fuel. After Poirier rebuilt himself, Conor McGregor returned to his path. 6 years earlier, he had broken Poirier with a left hand and a psychological assault. In the rematch, Poirier refused to be controlled by emotion. He repeatedly chopped McGregor's lead leg with calf kicks, slowly removing the foundation beneath his stance. Then, in the second round, Poirier found the opening in an exchange and finished him with a sustained combination.
Since the first time they fought.
Oh, big left and now a right.
Oh, that hurt bad.
Dustin Poirier has knocked out Conor McGregor.
Oh my goodness.
In the third fight, McGregor returned to the villain role. The insults, threats, and personal attacks came back. The question was whether the same words could still reach the same place inside Poirier's mind.
You must pay. Tomorrow I'm gonna make this man pay with his life. And I mean it. You're dead in that octagon tomorrow.
Then came the moment nobody expected. McGregor broke his leg at the end of the opening round. The ending was unsatisfying, but it still proved one thing. The young fighter who had once been led around by McGregor's words no longer existed. After completing his revenge, Poirier arrived at the championship door for a second time. This time, Charles Oliveira was standing guard. Oliveira had become one of the UFC's most dangerous champions through a submission game that could change shape from 1 second to the next. Could Poirier finally complete the dream?
Oh! There's a big right from Poirier.
What is it going to take to stop this guy?
Justin's in trouble.
It's under the neck.
He tapped.
2 years earlier, Khabib had taken his back and locked his neck. 2 years later, Oliveira did the same. The same door closed again. Poirier's boxing had become good enough to beat world champions. But in championship fights, someone always found a way around his hands and attacked the position he struggled most to protect. After defeating Michael Chandler, Poirier met Gaethje again for the BMF championship. In their first fight, Poirier had survived the war and finished Gaethje with combinations. In the rematch, Gaethje hit a right high kick behind his setup and completed the revenge. Poirier hit the canvas and, for the first time, seriously asked himself what he was still fighting for. His mental state fell to one of the lowest points of his career. It was not simply fear of losing. It was the emptiness that can find a man who already has fame, money, a family, and a catalog of unforgettable wars, yet suddenly cannot identify another reason to keep absorbing damage. The UFC's next offer was Benoît Saint Denis, a young, violent contender rising quickly through the rankings. Almost everyone believed the promotion was asking a veteran to become the launchpad for a new name. Poirier understood the risk, but he accepted it anyway. Former champions had once given him opportunities when he was climbing. Now it was his turn to place his own position on the table.
Oh! Saint Denis nearly out. Dustin Poirier has done it by KO in round 2.
In the second round, Poirier caught Saint Denis pressing forward too aggressively. A short right hook dropped him, and one final follow-up punch ended the fight. It was not the most historically important victory of Poirier's career, but it may have arrived at the moment he needed it most. It told the lightweight division that the diamond had not shattered. Then the third door appeared. Islam Makhachev was now the lightweight champion and widely regarded as the best pound-for-pound fighter in the world. 9 years earlier, Poirier had barely known the name. 9 years later, that man stood at the end of what looked like Dustin's final opportunity to become undisputed champion. Everyone knew Makhachev carried the same Dagestani system that had made Khabib unbeatable, but with an even more developed striking game. Poirier prepared more completely than he had for either previous title attempt. He defended takedowns, fought his way back to his feet, damaged the champion with punches, and forced the contest into the 5th round. This was no longer the reckless courage of his youth. It was a veteran with more than a decade of experience compressing everything he had learned into one final chance. But in the 5th round, Makhachev caught Poirier in a scramble with an ankle pick, secured the front headlock, and locked the Darce choke. For the 3rd time, Poirier challenged for the undisputed lightweight championship. For the 3rd time, he tapped Khabib, Oliveira, Makhachev. 3 title fights, 3 submission losses. That heartbreak cannot be explained by saying he was simply unlucky. Poirier's greatest weapons were his hands, his heart, and his ability to remain dangerous inside a war. But each time he charged toward the throne, the man guarding the door knew how to bypass his boxing and drag him into the position where the diamond had the fewest answers. That does not mean Poirier was not great enough. It does not mean he lacked championship ability. It means the strongest weapons of his career repeatedly met the same kind of tactical counter at the highest possible level. Poirier's final fight came against his old rival Max Holloway. In their first meeting, Poirier was the finisher. In the second, he became interim champion. In the third, inside his home state of Louisiana, he made his final walk and left the sport after one last 5-round battle. He never became the undisputed UFC lightweight champion, but he defeated Max Holloway, Justin Gaethje, Eddie Alvarez, Anthony Pettis, Michael Chandler, and Conor McGregor. He went from juvenile detention to the UFC, and from fighting on the regional circuit to headlining global pay-per-views. Whenever Dustin Poirier's name appeared on a fight card, fans understood one thing: someone was probably going to bleed. A championship belt can define the king of an era, but it cannot fully define a fighter like Dustin Poirier. Many champions retire and are remembered mainly for what they once possessed. When Poirier left, people remembered who he fought and how unforgettable those fights felt. He won more brutal wars than almost anyone of his generation. The only thing he never did was force open the final door to the undisputed throne. Yet because that door never opened, the diamond was left with the sharpest and perhaps the most painfully human edge of all. Thank you for watching Fight Epoch. Dustin Poirier never captured the undisputed lightweight championship, but whenever fans talk about the most violent, honest, and rewatchable fights of this era, his name will always be part of the conversation. We will see you in the next video.